So today we're going to be talking about UFC prospects that were rushed too soon. And starting off, we have got fan favourite fighter in Darren Till. So Darren Till has a professional MMA record of 18 wins, 5 losses and 1 draw. So Darren Till joined the UFC way back in 2015. He won his UFC debut by KO. He then went on to have a draw against Nicholas Dalby. And then after that, Darren Till went on to win his next 2 fights by decision. And that is where he was able to secure himself the Donald Cowboy Cerrone fight, which is the fight that really put Darren Till on the map. Darren Till went in there against Donald Cerrone, who is a legend of the sport of MMA, and absolutely battered Donald Cerrone in there. Darren Till smoked him inside a round. He butchered Donald Cerrone. I think he busted up his nose really badly. It was a brutal finish and a real statement performance from Darren Till, who after that fight basically had the world at his feet. A lot of people, including myself, thought Darren Till was the next coming of Conor McGregor. Bruh. Don't lie to yourself. Everybody thought that. Everybody thought this guy from Liverpool, who was a loud mouth, he kind of had that McGregor aura a bit around him, was a southpaw with a big heavy backhand. Everybody thought this was the guy who McGregor was going to pass the torch on to. Everybody thought that with Darren Till. And after the Donald Cerrone matchup, he was then given the spotlight in his hometown in Liverpool against former title challenger in Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Now, Donald Cerrone, while he was a great win for Darren Till, Cowboy Cerrone was always better as a lightweight. Ignore that voice break. Ignore that one as well. Let's be honest, Donald Cerrone is a legend of the game, but he done his best work in the lightweight division, and this fight did take place in the welterweight division for those who remember. But anyway, Darren Till got that spot against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in his hometown in Liverpool. Darren Till unfortunately missed weight for that matchup. Go back and listen to Darren Till talk about it. He made, like, the way he describes that weight cut was horrendous. I think he said at one point he'd actually lost his vision. He wasn't able to see. That's how bad this weight cut was for Darren Till. But not a good start to Darren Till headlining in Liverpool in his hometown. He missed weight. And then the fight itself against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson was also pretty shit for those who remember. If you don't remember, I completely understand. It's not memorable outside of Darren Till's ring walk and his post-fight speech. But it was a really, really close fight between him and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And I remember at the time, and even now, some people do say Stephen Wonderboy Thompson should have won that matchup. That's how close this was. But afterwards, Darren Till took to the mic, sold himself like he'd been doing since the Donald Cerrone statement win. And that's where he said he'll basically fight anybody. He's not scared of anybody. And that's when the UFC made the matchup for the title between Darren Till and Tyron Woodley. And in that matchup, Darren Till got shown levels. Tyron Woodley is easily one of the most underrated and underappreciated UFC fighters of all time. I know some people might be thinking Tyron Woodley, the guy who got knocked out by Jake Paul. Yes, Tyron Woodley is a top 3 UFC welterweight of all time. All time. Tyron Woodley is extremely underrated. The guy's got some really good wins on his resume, and he just showed Darren Till levels in there, dropped Darren Till and submitted him with the Doris choke inside 2 rounds, if I remember correctly. It was really one-sided in there from Tyron Woodley. And after that, Darren Till, it kind of went downhill for him after that. He then main evented in the O2 against Jorge Masvidal, where he was knocked out brutally by Jorge Masvidal. That Masvidal knockout is one of my favourites of all time. The way he just switch-hitted, if that makes... Switch-hitted? Is that even a word? The way he switch-hit Darren Till, shut his lights out, put him out cold, and that was the start of the run of Jorge Masvidal. But that there was a brutal KO loss for Darren Till, who then moved up and fought Kevin Gastelum in the middleweight division. Again, another really close performance from Darren Till that he was very lucky to get his hand raised from. After that, he then took on Robert Whittaker in a really fun matchup, and Darren Till was really unlucky in that fight. Robert Whittaker did deserve to get his hand raised, but Darren Till was also very good in that matchup and very unlucky. Then we move on to him losing to Derek Brunson, and then his most recent MMA fight is where he lost to Dricus du Plessis, who is now the UFC middleweight champion. So yeah, within the space of what? 6 fights? In the space of 6 fights, Darren Till was then rushed in there to fight Tyron Woodley, with really only having, well, I suppose Cowboy Cerrone was ranked at the time. but Wonderboy really being like the high marquee ranked opponent that he beat. Obviously, the big show for Darren Till, the big like this is Darren Till, the big performance for him was the Cowboy Cerrone one, but his real big like ranked win was Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and it was a really, really close matchup as well. I think Darren Till probably could have benefited of having at least one more matchup in the welterweight division against another ranked opponent before being rushed in there against Tyron Woodley. And I'm pretty sure in the Tyron Woodley matchup, it was a pretty quick turnaround and a tough weight cut for Darren Till to make. But he is the first one on this list. Moving up next, we have got Abbas Magomedov. Now, this guy right here, Abbas, has a current professional MMA record of 27 wins, 6 losses, 1 no contest. He's got 14 wins by KO, 7 wins by submission. And Abbas Magomedov had fought in other big organisations before joining the UFC, notably the PFL, where he went 3-1. And Abbas was on a 2-fight win streak when he entered the UFC. And on his UFC debut, he got the win in the very first round. And after that win in the very first round, who did they give to Abbas Magomedov? They give Abbas Magomedov Sean Strickland, who was very highly ranked at the time. I think he might have been he was definitely inside the top 6 or 7 in the middleweight division when Abbas Magomedov got that matchup. That is right. Abbas Magomedov went in there, fought an unranked guy, beat him in the first round by KO. I can't remember who he fought in his debut, to be honest. Kind of just went past my memory. But then he was given the Sean Strickland matchup, and that is where Abbas Magomedov kind of got found out in a way. I mean, Abbas Magomedov had a good first round against Sean Strickland, but Sean Strickland was able to kind of show that hole in Abbas Magomedov's game, and that is that the guy severely slows down as the fight goes on, and that is what happened in that matchup against Sean Strickland. And then Abbas Magomedov was then stopped by Sean Strickland. That there, I think, was the win that got Sean Strickland the fight against Adesanya, if I remember correctly. And it was a good performance from Sean Strickland. But since then, Abbas Magomedov went on to lose to Caio Borralho. He is now on a 2-fight win streak in the middleweight division, coming off a submission win over Bruno Ferreira at UFC... What UFC was that? Was that 308, was it? The Topuria Holloway matchup. Something's telling me it was on that card. But yes, Abbas Magomedov, for those who remember, this guy was a hyped prospect, if you will call it that, coming in to the UFC when he did. And moving on, we have got Steve Erceg. Now, Steve Erceg has a current MMA record of 12 wins, 4 losses. He has got 2 wins by KO, 6 wins by submission. He joined the UFC back in 2023. He won his first 2 fights by decision and then got that marquee win against Matt Chanel, who he was able to KO. And after that, after he KO'd Matt Chanel, who, if I remember correctly, wasn't even ranked inside the top 5. I actually don't even know if he was ranked inside the top 10 when Steve Erceg beat him. They then give Steve Erceg the matchup against Pantoja, the current champion at the time. That just goes to show you the flyweight division. Steve Erceg knocks out Matt Chanel, who has never even really been a title challenger, if we're being honest. And then he gets put in there against Pantoja. Now, in fairness to Steve Erceg, the guy actually held his own at times in there against Pantoja. Some people, for some reason, thought Steve Erceg won that matchup. I never really understood that. Steve Erceg clearly lost that, in my opinion. Pantoja clearly won that fight. But Steve Erceg, nonetheless, went in there against Pantoja after only 3 fights in the UFC. After 3 fights in the UFC and only 1 ranked win against a lower ranked guy in Matt Chanel, they then fed him to someone who might actually end up going down as the greatest flyweight of all time. That's how good Pantoja is. And since then, Steve Erceg hasn't got any easier matchups. He then got KO'd by Kai Car-France at UFC 305. And then most recently in the main event of UFC Fight Night Mexico, he got beat up by Brandon Moreno. I think they ruined Steve Erceg by rushing him too quick. I think this guy is definitely going to be ranked in the flyweight division for quite some time. Whether he challenges for the belt again, I don't think so. But yeah, Steve Erceg, yeah, he's so technical. That's the thing with Steve Erceg. That's what everyone was saying in the matchup against Brandon Moreno. He's so technical. He is, but being technical doesn't win you all these matchups, and unfortunately Steve Erceg was just rushed too soon in my opinion, and since then he hasn't really been able to go back down the levels to where he really is at, to be honest, to then develop his skills a bit more. He's been in there with Kai Car-France and then Brandon Moreno. Moreno's a former champion as well, so it hasn't been smooth sailing for Steve Erceg. And finally, capping off the video, we have got Benoit Saint Denis. This guy's a current record of 13 wins, 3 losses, 4 wins by KO, 9 wins by submission. BSD has never ever won a fight by decision. 4 by KO, 9 by submission, 0 by decision. If Benoit Saint Denis is beating you, he is finishing you. But Benoit Saint Denis, he did lose his UFC debut, and then he went on a 5-fight win streak. Now obviously all of those wins did come by way of finish, and then after that he did get in a matchup against Dustin Poirier. Now Benoit Saint Denis, I don't even think Matt Frevola wasn't ranked when he KO'd him, and Thiago Moises wasn't ranked whenever he beat him either. So literally, Benoit Saint Denis' first ranked opponent was one of the greatest lightweights of all time in Dustin Poirier, and we all know what happened in that matchup. It was a 5-round co-main event for Benoit Saint Denis, who actually was the favourite going into that matchup against Dustin Poirier. I did pick Dustin Poirier to beat Benoit Saint Denis, although after watching the fight, I'm going to be honest, if Benoit Saint Denis didn't have staph infection, I think he actually might have beat Dustin Poirier. I really do. I think if this guy didn't go into that matchup with staph, I think there was a good chance that he actually would have beaten Dustin Poirier. But anyway, he got stopped badly in there against Dustin Poirier. He had a lot of big shots in there. And then his fight after that was against Moicano, and Moicano beat the living shit out of Benoit Saint Denis badly. That is one of the worst beatings I've seen in the UFC since I've been watching it. Benoit Saint Denis was butchered by Moicano. I still think Benoit Saint Denis can turn it around. He does have a really tough fight next though against Joel Alvarez. Joel Alvarez has to be the favourite in that matchup, but for some reason I think Benoit Saint Denis is going to get it done. But yeah, those are some prospects that I think were rushed too soon, in my opinion, in the UFC. You can let me know your opinion in the comments below. What other prospects are there? And thanks again for the support. And as always, like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And I'll see you all again in the next one.